Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, a celebration of video game characters in one fighting game. While this game is an ambitious crossover, does everyone have their favorite childhood characters in? For some of you, Mario and Sonic in the game may be your childhood heroes, or maybe you remember Steve from Minecraft being the way that you'd pass your weekends and summer vacations, cause you were like me and had no friends. Yikes. The truth is there's no way to truly get your own bias out of a roster that you make that truly hits nostalgic notes from your gaming library from time you picked up the first controller to 2026. So instead of trying to create for yourself a roster that has no bias, or only based off of information alone, today's fun exercise is a new concept I'd like to call your Super Smash Bros. Manifesto. A manifesto shows your alignment with different beliefs, ideas, or groups of things. If you're like me, you have played video games since your childhood and are still playing them unto this day. You may not remember every game that you've played throughout your life, but doing this may help jog your memory as to memorable games that molded your gaming manifesto. So why don't you pause the video and take a minute or two to write down at least 10 most influential games, not series, games that molded your manifesto. Alright, pause now. Take your time. I'll wait. Now that you're unpaused, are all these games represented in Smash? I think the answer is probably a resounding no, unless you are strictly a Nintendo gamer. I went back and wrote down a list of every single game I remember playing throughout my entire gaming life up until now. The games I have played myself and the games that I have demoed far outweigh the roster slots in Smash Bros. Ultimate. But what if we narrowed down the list, firstly to only games with characters represented in Smash? How many characters would be in my Smash Ultimate roster? Firstly, we need to add just a couple boundaries to this fun practice. Stick around for the second roster too, it's about to get wild. Number 1. You will have to have played the game physically for yourself for at least 5 minutes. Watching hours of it on YouTube or your older sibling playing it doesn't count, even if it may be nostalgic to you. You do not have to own this game personally either. Number 2. For this exercise, the Smash series games will not count for a game I have played, or else every person in the roster would be from a game that I've played. This will be the exception later on in the video, so stay tuned. Number 3. Virtual Console, demos, and emulation does not count as a game that you've played. The game has to be on its original hardware. Remakes do count, as they are technically brand new games, not just ports. Museum or collection titles also count as they are repackaged as new games. And number 4, the last rule, the character must have been available in the game you have played while you have played it. For example, if a DLC or character was added in the game later on when you did not play the game, that player will not count towards the character from your roster. For this sake, mobile and arcade games count towards your character, but the character must be available when you played it. Alright, now to learn a little bit about myself and my gaming library through this exercise. Comment your final Smash Ultimate roster in the comments below using only characters from games that you've played. Now, by first look at this roster, you can get kind of an idea of the games that I've gravitated towards. Many Nintendo fans have their favorites, many of which are only their favorites because of Smash, but not often because they played their main series games. I've heard that it's been more the case that Smash characters becoming people's favorite characters has caused players to go back and play the games that they held from for themselves, which is why Smash is a great promotional platform for weaker Nintendo dating sims, like Fire Emblem. My Mario, Zelda, and Pokemon bias are already showing here early in this roster. Over half the roster options here are from these series or appeared as a crossover with these series before. But you were probably pretty surprised as to which characters are not represented in my roster. Well, despite recently loving Star Fox games on NSO Classics, I've never owned or played a Star Fox game on its original hardware. Metroid also takes another L here, as I have never played any games with Samus in them despite her series being a huge Nintendo IP. Finally, a lot of third-party characters didn't make the cut, as I have not personally branched off much from Nintendo games throughout my life, with the exception of Minecraft, Pac-Man, and Sonic here. Doing the exercise really surprised me as to whose main series games I've actually played, and it really opened my eyes as to how many series I have missed out on so far. One more note before we move on. While I've only played one Fire Emblem game, Awakening on the 3DS, I did play the mobile game Heroes for a while on the iOS. At the time, Ike was available as a playable hero, but not any of the new pro tags in the series. For this reason, Byleth and Corrin are excluded from my roster. And that's my every copy of Smash Ultimate is personalized roster for you. But why stop here? Just because the character appeared in a game I played, does that mean I want many Pokemon or sword fighters in my roster? What if I want more Blue Blur characters? What if one of my third-party games I did play a lot growing up isn't represented? This is where we start to make rosters that we tend to skew to what we think needs more representation based off of our personal likes and dislikes, or just what makes sense to us. So, this exercise will be the epitome of Burger King's philosophy, have it your way. This is how we are going to craft your perfect Smash Bros. Ultimate roster, according to your own gaming library. This is what the Smash Bros. Manifesto roster is all about. But we need a few more simple rules. Number 1. All previous rules that I read in the previous roster apply, with the exception of rule number 2, which states Smash games don't count. I say, forget you. Smash is a game I've played and I love it. And it may be the only way my Smash faves get in because I have inevitably never played their main series games in their OG format because I am poor. Number 2, you can only choose one character. Yes, you heard me right. Only one character from every game you have played. Although, I guess you could get unique by what quote-unquote one character means, as Pokemon Trainer is one character but 3 Pokemon are playable. Number 3, there are the same number of slots available in this roster as there are in Smash Ultimate, including DLCs, which means 86 game slots are available. And you can always make it less if you haven't played that many games or can't remember. You don't have to include every single game that you've played in your library, especially if it exceeds 86. Just the ones that you care about the most. And number 4, lastly, characters don't have to fit into the Smash formula or have to make sense. They just have to be from a video game on a console, arcade machine, web game, or mobile device, and be special enough to make it into your Everyone is Here roster. Alright, enough with the yap session, let's get planning your Smash Bros. Manifesto roster. First, with a pen and a paper or on your notes app, take your top 10 games that you thought of before, and just keep adding 10 more games as you're thinking about them. Really think about, what was the first game I ever played? Or, what game did I play with my sibling when I was younger? Or even, what was that game my best friend let me borrow that I loved but never owned myself? This will help you increase your library of games that you remember playing. If I may, while you're thinking of this, I'd love to share some of my personal memories with you about games that I remembered. My very first game that I ever played was technically a Pac-Man arcade machine. I was at summer camp with my dad, and he took me to a pizza place with this girl and her dad too. In the corner was the arcade cabinet with Mrs. Pac-Man playable there. He popped in a quarter, and I watched as she gobbled up the dots and avoided the ghosts. I returned to that same town randomly last year actually, and I tried to look for the pizza shop. Although unfortunately the shop is a very different restaurant now, the layout remains the same and reminds me of the place where I played my very first video game with my dad. My first physical game I ever owned was LEGO Star Wars The Trilogy. For my white Nintendo DS Lite. It technically was a Game Boy game, but, you know, I could play it on my DS. I remember playing that on the floor in my old living room before it was relocated to our newer, larger edition that we put on the house later. It also had many Easter eggs in the game, including the Star Wars Disco and Jabba sail barge that I will never forget. Finally guys, I have a confession. When I was a kid, my garage sale PS2 was pretty scuffed. It would sometimes play games and other times not. I loved the Star Wars Battlefront games on there and Hot Shots Golf. But Sonic Heroes was one of my favorites. However, I would never get too far on it because the game would freeze on loading screens often and would not allow me to pass it. I remember one time I finally got to that spooky mansion level, but the game froze and I left it on for hours just hoping it would come back on. So what is my confession? Well, my confession is that I borrowed the game from the library one time to see if that game would work, and I swapped it out with my broken copy, which never really solved the issue anyway. It was the system itself. However, as an adult, I feel a little ashamed for doing this, even for a game like Sonic Heroes. Now, after recalling all the classic and modern games that I've played, I then started choosing one character from each to add, and I encourage you to do that now. Time to throw in photos into a tier list or draw up your roster. You get 86 spots, so use them wisely. I have a disgusting amount of Mario characters to wade through. Mario has a lot of games, and I have played many of them, including many of the iconic spin-offs like all of the Mario Karts, and a lot of the Mario sports games. This roster is pretty skewed towards Mario, again. I made sure to include the essentials, as well as some deserving choices, and a few of my personal favorites from my childhood from the Mario series. Because I am a huge Animal Crossing fan, I finally have a roster that has more than just Villager and Isabelle to its name. Tom Nook and Rossetti can join in the fray now. The other criminally unrepresented series in Smash is Zelda. And guys, I don't believe that 3 Links is a good representation of the series. So I finally got to bring in some of my overall love for the series throughout my gaming years into Smash to represent the different eras. Now, the fun characters. Although my base roster was only Sonic, Steve, and Pac-Man for third-party characters, this new roster has a colorful cast of oddballs from games that I would never see in Smash, and would probably never add to a real roster prediction, but are special to my gaming library and this manifesto. You know, I really enjoyed creating my manifesto roster because it reminded me of the many games that formed my childhood library, and how I spent many days and nights playing. While Mario and Animal Crossing were my personal standouts throughout my lifetime, Zelda and Pokemon were really the runners-up when it comes to other secondary series that formed me. A few games that I had forgotten that I even played came up while I was thinking about these too, including the Wreck-It Ralph arcade machine in Disney World's defunct video game attraction, Disney Quest, and the Pack-In AR game from the 3DS where you could scan cards with the 3DS camera and make 3D image of Nintendo characters appear. You will never see any of these characters in Smash, but who cares? This is my roster! I wonder what sort of wacky picks are on your third-party roster. Does yours beat my Tony Hawk Pro Skater pick? Alrighty, this is my perfect Smash Bros. Manifesto roster, an ode to every video game I have ever played. Yes, this roster is the most impractical roster you have probably ever seen. And that's saying something because my old rosters were pretty bad and included many of these horrible excuses for character. Oh my gosh, that's Mickey Mouse on a roster. Web games like Webkins, Bearville, and mobile games like Angry Birds and Among Us also appear. Stardew Valley and My Sims avatars make appearances, and even the Just Dancers are here to moonwalk like Michael Jackson on the stage. The Smash stage, that is. But this is my gaming library, not Sakurai's, not yours. It's entirely made up of characters that are ingrained into my memory for all my life as the heroes, the villains, the oddballs, and even the sentient balance boards of my childhood. Now, let's discuss your interesting choice in video games from your past. Let's just hope it looks a little bit better than the Nintendo eShop. Hey, thanks for watching this video about my Smash Bros. Manifesto. What did your roster look like? Let us know in the comments, and if you liked doing this and watching me do it, then subscribe to our channel for more videos quite like this here on the MFC. Hope you have a lovely day, and we'll see you in the next one. Take care.